Hi, this is Lou, and this is another in the Nuts and Bolts of Game Design series. This time about analysis paralysis, what contributes to it, and what a designer can do to avoid it. Many, if not most, gamers are subject to this condition sometime or other. They're faced with difficult decisions in a game, a difficult situation, and they more or less freeze up. Or at least they take forever to take their play. The longest I ever saw was 20 minutes for a fairly simple decision. So there had to be something else going on there. Some of this is a matter of personality and of conditions at the time, which isn't something the designer can do anything about. But some things the designer can do something about. And most everyone agrees, AP, analysis paralysis, is unwanted in games. So what contributes to analysis paralysis? First of all, puzzles. There is by definition in a puzzle one or more perfect solutions. So players try to find the perfect move, and that often takes a long time. Puzzles is the number one contribution to analysis paralysis. The second is that there are too many choices for a decision. And that can include all the choices, even if many of them aren't viable, because if the person hasn't played the game, they may not yet recognize the difference between viable and unviable choices. In general, it's better to have several viable choices only and not a lot. Now, I said personality and things the designer can't control can contribute to this. I took a class once about one of the personality tests, I think it was Myers-Briggs, and discovered something I hadn't quite realized. Some people feel better after they make a decision. So they try to make decisions relatively quickly, and are usually happy with whatever decision they take. Other people feel better before they make a decision, and they often waffle back and forth after they first decide. So they gather information and consider all the possibilities. This is where deliberate, quote-unquote, or just plain slow players come from. They're the second personality type. Now, I've not noticed that either type makes better decisions than the other, but the second type takes quite a bit longer. Now, puzzles by definition have always correct solutions. That is to say, perfect moves that you can figure out beforehand. Good games don't have many, if any, perfect moves. If a game has an always correct solution for the entire game, that's called a dominant strategy, and that's a no-no in game design. But in puzzle design and puzzle games, it's okay. The difference being that if there's just one player, one dominant strategy is fine. But if there's two or more players, you need to have what are often called multiple paths to victory, which is to say, multiple always correct solutions. So how do you counter this? First, avoid puzzles. Avoid puzzles. Avoid puzzles. At least puzzles that take up a large part of your game. But if you, like a great many designers, make puzzle games, parallel competitions where people are mostly doing their own thing, you're likely to be unable to avoid having perfect play, even if there are multiple paths to victory. Even the generally accepted best move in this situation can be beyond beginner's knowledge. And so they have to mull about things that other people feel they know the right choice for because they played the game enough to have recognized it. Keep in mind again, puzzles tend to have this generally accepted best move in this situation. Games, not so much. Another way to avoid analysis paralysis is hidden information. If there's no way to calculate a perfect move because you don't know enough, then many people will stop trying to calculate a perfect move. Some people will just go into a funk, yes. But nothing is perfect. Chance is another thing you can add to the game. Yes, you can figure probabilities, but at some point it's very difficult for the average person to calculate probabilities. And so it may not be possible to be perfect in a game where there's a lot of chance. Reduce the number of choices and the number of decisions in the game as a whole. Faced with too many choices, some players freeze up. For example, some people won't play old-fashioned war games where you have to decide each turn what to do with 40 to 50 or more pieces. It's too many variables, too many choices. And that's perfectly reasonable. What can you do? Well, you can use committed intent to help avoid analysis paralysis in such games. I have another video that talks about committed intent that'll be released soon, but essentially players have cards and there's an identical set of cards for each player, and they pick one and put it face down. Everybody turns them up. They're executed in number order, and that card limits what you can do when it's actually your turn to do something. This is, in many respects, like worker placement, in other respects not. Worker placement is popular because it limits the number of choices in the main decision of the game. It simplifies things. It reduces the number of choices. And so it reduces the likelihood of analysis paralysis. You can also simplify. And many of you have heard this before. My motto, a designer knows he has achieved perfection, not when there is nothing left to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. But simplification will probably not work if your game is a puzzle, because complexity usually makes the puzzle harder. It's really hard to devise simple puzzles that are in turn hard to solve. But even if we can do that, we may be back to analysis paralysis. So, analysis paralysis can happen in almost any game, but mainly in puzzle-like games and complex games. Thanks for listening.